Hello, this is a revision video for the GCSE poem Winter Swans by Owen. As ever, these videos are never intended to be a comprehensive guide to everything you could possibly say about the poem. They're merely a few suggestions that you could supplement your notes with or that might help your own interpretations, but they shouldn't be used as an exhaustive guide. Your own interpretations about a poem are always going to be more convincing to an examiner. I'm going to start by reading through the poem and then just give you a few things that you could say about this poem as part of the revision video. The clouds had given their all, 2 days of rain and then a break in which we walked, the waterlogged earth gulping for breath at our feet as we skirted the lake, silent and apart, until the swans came and stopped us with a show of tipping in unison, as if rolling weights down their bodies to their heads, they halved themselves in the dark water. Icebergs of white feather paused before returning again, like boats righting in rough weather. They mate for life, you said as they left, porcelain over the stilling water. I didn't reply, but as we moved on through the afternoon light, slow stepping in the lake's shingle and sand, I noticed our hands that had, somehow, swum the distance between us, and folded one over the other like a pair of wings settling after flight. What's it all about? It's a couple on a walk who seem to have experienced an argument. We don't know this explicitly, but the pathetic fallacy and the gloominess of the scene seem to imply this. They see two swans on the lake, which prompts them to their own resolution for their relationship, or at least for their argument. There's natural imagery throughout, which frequently reflects the couple and their experience of the world through the weather and through the swans in particular. In terms of context, Owen is a contemporary poet whose poems often contain themes such as identity and relationships, and he's influenced by the landscapes he has grown up with. He was born in 1974 in Fiji, but lived for most of his life as he was growing up in Wales. This particular poem is taken from Shears's collection of poems, which was called Skirrid Hill. The translation of skirrid from its original Welsh means shattered or split, which perhaps in particular reflects the subject matter of this poem and the separation that the two lovers face in their relationship. Swans in the literary tradition. This ranges from Greek mythology, for example, Leda and the Swan, but you've also got the Irish poet W.B. Yeats's poem The Wild Swans at Cool, and there's a Nicaraguan poet, Ruben Dario, who also believed in the swan as a sort of symbol for modernist poetry. Much of the depiction of swans in literature is related to their graceful nature, or perhaps the popular idea that swans mate for life. Going through the first two stanzas then, starting with the title evokes a sense of cold or ice through calling the poem Winter Swans rather than any other season or just swans in general. Winter is a natural part of the cyclical cycle of the year, the seasons that change from spring to summer to autumn to winter. So it's possible that the idea of winter swans offers some hope of resolution or some hope of a coming spring, or it could simply be reflecting the end of a relationship. The clouds had given their all 2 days of rain and then a break in which we walked. The poem immediately starts with pathetic fallacy. It's a sympathetic background. This is not a joyful summer's day for a couple walking. This is a gloomy, relentless sense of rain. The words and the language in this stanza is mostly monosyllabic, which means the words are mostly made up of one syllable in the first couple of stanzas. I think given might be the only exception in the first stanza, which creates quite a plodding and dulled rhythm to the poem. In addition, there's a dash at the end of the first line, which you can call a caesura, a sort of break in the pace, suggesting that there's a sense of ending or finality. The clouds have given everything they've got and it's over. There's been 2 days of rain, and perhaps then there's a break, which could indicate a temporary relief from the fighting, from the storm, the metaphorical storm, as well as the physical storm. The line lengths in this stanza, but indeed almost all the way through, are quite irregular, so you can see the first and third lines are shorter than the second line. This creates a natural speaking pattern, and indicates that Shears has written his poem in free verse, so it doesn't have any particular unified rhyme scheme at the end of the lines. The irregularity of this structure could reflect the couple's relationship too. In the second stanza, you've got the waterlogged earth gulping for breath at our feet as we skirted the lake, silent and apart. So the metaphor gulping for breath and the waterlogged earth, which has been totally drenched with water, suggests an almost overpowering sense of starvation and suffering, that they can't quite catch their breath, they can't get a break, they can't quite say almost what they want to say. It could reflect the sound of crying as well from someone who is ferociously sobbing. The metaphor reflects their relationship and how they can't seem to communicate, they can't seem to get their words heard. And this is supported by the subordinate clause, silent and apart, and the commas there separating the subordinate clause from the rest of the sentence, potentially reflecting the tension between the couple, causing you to pause slightly as you read those three words, silent and apart. Furthermore, you could look at the word skirted, which could suggest that you're tentatively going around the edge of something, almost as if the couple are avoiding a difficult subject, as if they don't want to talk about something. Throughout the poem, you have the inclusive pronouns in almost every stanza. For example, in the first stanza, you've got we walked, and in the second stanza, you've got our feet. And the effect of these inclusive pronouns, something that makes the reader feel included, is it gives it an anecdotal feel, in my view, and I think it makes it sound more personal too. The next two stanzas, you've got quite abrupt enjambment between the second stanza and the third stanza, between the words apart and until, and it emphasises the Swans' entrance, and I think it gives you the sense that something is changing in the poem. Until the Swans came and stopped us with a show of tipping in unison. So it's almost as if the Swans are putting on a display for the couple. The Swans are united in contrast to the couple who are silent and apart. So I quite like that interesting use of contrast. And the simile conveys the graceful movement of the swan, as if they're rolling weights down their bodies to their heads. They halved themselves in the dark water, icebergs of white feather, paused before returning again, like boats righting in rough weather. So the watery metaphors continue with the idea of them halving themselves. It's that quite common idea of you having a better half or another half within a couple, suggesting that these two swans are somehow incomplete without each other, and by extension the couple are incomplete without each other. They are separate parts of one whole. The wintry and the cold imagery continues with the icebergs of white feather as a metaphor. But if you think about icebergs and the science behind them, it could also imply hidden meaning and depths too, in the idea that 2/3 of an iceberg is below the water's surface and only 1/3 is visible above it. The simile, like boats righting in rough weather, I think shows the potential for a reconciliation within the couple. It implies that they can weather the storm, they can ride out the storm, and like boats righting in rough weather is a simile suggesting that there will be calm and that they will be able to introduce the possibility of resolution and hope. The final slide then is, they mate for life, you said, as they left, porcelain over the stilling water. I didn't reply, but as we moved on through the afternoon light, slow stepping in the lake's shingle and sand, I noticed our hands that had somehow swum the distance between us and folded one over the other like a pair of wings settling after flight. So it's all one sentence, the last three stanzas. The direct speech that comes in at the top of that slide there suggests the first sense of story and audience in the poem. So it's the only piece of direct speech, and the narrator in this poem doesn't reply. And it tells the audience about that popular belief about swans mating for life. And they are like the boats that right in rough weather. They are porcelain over the stilling water. So even the water is calming as we continue through the poem. Porcelain is very delicate, very smooth. And so the swans and the water and nature as the couple are beginning to communicate and as they are beginning to resolve their differences, they seem to be coming together and nature seems to be smoothing and stilling too. I didn't reply, but as we moved on through the afternoon light, and I like the idea of moved on being in a sense metaphorical as well as them physically moving on, it gives you a sense of hope about the end of the poem. Slow stepping in the lake's shingle and sand, I think, is really soft, soothing sibilance with gentle repetition of the S sounds, combined with the assonance in the poem, which is similar vowel sounds being used together. So you've got examples for perhaps in show and rolling. You've also got white and writing in rough weather as well as light. You've also got you and through in the stanza at the top of the page there. And I think the assonance and the sibilance together gives it quite a gentle tone. I like the idea that in the penultimate stanza where the narrator says, I noticed our hands that had somehow swum the distance between us. It's continuing the connection with the swans, but there's also a sense of inevitability and wonder that actually he's noticing the hands moving together. And the subordinate clause somehow suggests they're not quite sure how this relationship has been resolved, but somehow they're managing to make up their differences. And folded one over the other like a pair of wings settling after flight. The fact that the poem has been written in tercets up until this point, that's 3-line stanzas, and the final stanza is a couplet, is really significant. Thematically, it reminds the reader of the Swans, but the couplet also reminds you that the couple are resolving their differences. They are finally a couple, again, if you want to look at it like that. But it also reflects the Shakespearean tradition, where Shakespeare would finish his acts, his plays, important lines with rhyming couplets. In this case, it doesn't rhyme, but a couplet is quite significant in marking the end of an act or the end of something important.